Hey, welcome to an honest gear review. I've got a Squier Classic Vibe 60s precision bass. I know, the internet's full of them. YouTube's got tons of reviews of this bass and similar basses already, but they fall into three categories from what I can tell. Number one, there's the guy who reads the spec sheet from Fender's press office and then shows you a ton of chops. Number two, there are those who think this is just the best bass ever. This $400 bass is the best thing, and there's never any need to buy an American Jazz or American Precision or a Custom Shop or any other brand. Just all you need is this cheap one, and the cheaper the better. And then the third category is the guy who's like, yeah, it's a piece of shit, don't even bother. It's not a piece of shit, and it's not the world's best bass. And very few of the reviews actually tell you how it's built, what to look for, what to look out for. So I'm going to try to be, I don't know, a voice of reason out there. I'm not going to say the voice of reason, but a fairly reasonable voice. Is this the best bass in the world? No. Sadly, I did not get the best bass in the world for $350. Is it a good bass? Yeah, it's a good bass. Let me show you why I think that. Number one, just an overview. It is a precision bass. If you don't know what that is, you're watching the wrong channel. It is made of poplar instead of alder. It has a similar tonal character. It has a similar kind of look. The wood grain's not as pretty, but it looks nice. This is a three-piece body at least. You can see the seams on the back. On the front, the seams are fairly hidden. That's nice. It's a nice three-color burst. It's a polyester finish. It's not as thick a polyester finish as some of the made in Japan P&J basses I had in the 80s and 90s, the ones that are so sought after. I never thought they were that great a bass. They were like an inch thick finish and didn't feel that much better than this. The other day I pulled the pick guard to do a little insert video for this, and I just didn't have very good lighting because it was a rainy, cloudy day, and the best lighting I can use for these videos is natural light. And so that didn't come out. I'm not going to pull it again. I'll just tell you what's underneath here. You've got a standard P-bass route, a little channel here that goes to a standard P-bass cavity. The cavity is shielded, kind of sort of helping you. It doesn't have the best continuity. From a point here to a point here, I measured 6.5K, and from here to here in the main cavity, I measured almost 3K. You know, a real shielding job, you're looking to get under 50 ohms. But it's better than nothing. I wasn't expecting shielding at all in a price point at this price point. The pickup's pretty good. It's not fantastic. Won't be for this price point. But there's nothing inherently wrong with it. You'll hear it in just a moment. You know, if you want to throw a Lawler in, if you want to throw a Fralin in, you want to throw a Duncan in, be my guest. It can only get better than this, but this is not a bad place to be. For the price, I'm pleased with the pickup. And it's quiet, as it should be. It's got two alpha 16 millimeter knurled shaft pots. They work just fine. 250K audio taper on both. It's got a little 0.047, 0.05 microfarad green polyester cap in the tone circuit. There are lots of people who want to sell you a really expensive paper and oil cap. It doesn't make any difference. I prefer 100 nanofarad, 0.1 microfarad in a P-bass. 47 is my second favorite. 47 is probably what most people will like. It works well. Both pots work. You hear the tone throughout the entire range pretty much. No pressing need to change any of these things. These are press-on knobs because they have knurled shafts. They're actual metal. They're not plastic painted to look like metal. So, you know, no issue with these. The only thing here that I would really fault is the output jack. It's really flimsy. It's not going to have good mechanical strength for repeated insertions and removals of a plug. It did not have a lock washer. As it came, the nut was loose. All the nuts were loose. I tightened them up. On this one, it's a must to replace this with a Switchcraft. A Switchcraft L11 jack is what, $3. Any tech can enlarge this hole to 3/8 inch. Put in a Switchcraft jack with a 3/8 inch toothed washer and resolder that for you. Be less than $20 for most people. I can't speak for most techs. I would do this for most people for $20. free if it's a friend, just pay for the parts, whatever. It's easy to do. If you know how to solder, if you have access to a stepped bit or a reamer, you can do it yourself. You've got to enlarge the hole in the pick guard to 3/8 of an inch to fit the larger switchcraft jack. Totally worth it. So that's the only place where I would ding this for the price point. I think Fender could have done better on this. This is such a crucial thing. But, you know, as it is, it sounds like a P-bass. Is it going to sound like the world's best P-bass? No, but you get a guy with a 57 and you got a guy with a 62 and they'll argue all day long about whose sounds better. Meanwhile, there's some guy from 1974 laughing at them both. What is the world's best P-bass? No one agrees. This is pretty darn good for the price. It's got a maple neck with a nice tight grain, flats on. It's got a polyester finish with a vintage tint, you know, that slight orange, but it doesn't look like a pumpkin. It's got a nice grain to it. I have no problem with the neck. It's been stable, you know, this whole 4 days I've had it. If you don't like the gloss, you can get some Scotch-Brite 4.0 synthetic steel wool and spend about 3 minutes. You'll have a satin back of the neck. The tuners are cheap, but they do the job to an extent, by which I mean, once you get it to pitch, it stays there. It's not binding at the nut. There's no issue with the bridge. The tuners aren't slipping. But say I'm 6 cents flat on the A string and I just barely turn the tuning key. Well, all of a sudden I'm 7 cents sharp. It's just very coarse. So getting it right up to pitch is a little tricky. Down the line, I may change these tuners out for some hip shots or something. For right now, they do the job. The nut for a piece of plastic slapped on the bass en masse, I'm pretty impressed. If I fret at the 3rd fret, none of the strings really want to move at the 1st fret. It's fairly low for a factory nut. And it's not binding in the slots. These are Diodario nickel strings. I think they're 45 through 100, 110, fairly standard stuff. So yeah, a bone nut done by a good tech can be even lower than this, but I've seen so many factory guitars and basses where this stock nut is just ridiculously too high and throws the tuning and feel off. This is quite good. Like I said, for a factory nut on a very inexpensive guitar, this synthetic is quite good, but it has some sharp edges, just some sharp square angles that aren't the most comfortable for your left hand. So I'm going to file those down a little bit, just kind of smooth that over. All right, I wasn't trying to do perfect. I was trying to just make it comfortable. So just taped it off and took a file, knocked off the rough edges where the finger hits, and smoothed that out with some 800 grit sandpaper. You know, if I really cared, I go to micro mesh or whatever, but this eventually will probably get a bone nut just as everything I play does. But for right now, this feels a lot better to the hand. No hard squares to hit. So next. The neck fits in the neck pocket very snugly. There's no excess paint in there. I'm not taking this bass apart again. I did it once and it was a cloudy, rainy day. I couldn't get good video. Trust me, the neck pocket fit is very snug. There's no excess paint. Doesn't have any binding or places where it bulges up against the pick guard. The frets are, they call them vintage tall or vintage narrow. They're appropriate. I think it's a 9-inch radius opposed to 7 1/4. They feel fine. I don't think that these are going to be the best grade of frets, so I would not personally put stainless steel strings on this because I think it will chew through them. But I'm going to stick with nickel strings for that reason. I'm just not in a rush to spend $200 getting a new fret job on a $350 bass. The frets don't have any sprout. There's no jagged edges. They don't hurt as I do this. I do feel them. They're not perfectly rounded, but they're fairly well rounded. You'll see that a little bit more coming up in a little close-up video I did of the neck. I'll go in there with a fret finishing file and make them pretty. But, you know, on a $430 instrument, doesn't really matter. You don't expect it to be as good as a Sir or a custom shop or insert your favorite here. I'm just really happy to know that I'm not going to start bleeding when I run my hand up and down the neck. As far as issues, it doesn't have the ramping up here where it uplift like a lot of P's and J's have, where it bolts to the body. Doesn't need to have any special fret dressing to offset that. That's good. As a hell test, I took the neck completely straight, no relief whatsoever, and I got the strings really low, and I found two problem spots. With no relief and very low action, it buzzed at the 8th fret on the G string, and that buzz is gone when I have a little bit of relief and more of a medium low action. This is some people's medium action. But here at the 18th fret on the G string, it's still there. 19th is gone. 15th is gone. A little bit of the 16th, a little bit of the 17th, and then there, 18th, there it is. So I don't know whether 18 is low or 19 is high. I'll get that looked at. That's not the kind of issue that needs a full level and dress. Once I identify which fret it is, it can be spot corrected. I suspect it's the 19th, it's just a little bit high. Again, for the price, to have every fret but that one really just fine. It's quite nice. Indian Laurel fretboard. It's not rosewood. Of course it's not rosewood for this price. It's not even Palo Ferro. It is Indian Laurel, which is not the prettiest wood. It feels okay once it's conditioned. I'll show you more on that. It just doesn't look that great. There's one little finish flaw here you'll see in the upcoming video. It's not so bad now, but when this came, this was very dry and dusty, and that finish flaw was more apparent. I hope that they get better at making synthetic fretboard material for instruments in this price range. I think a good synthetic is a better looking solution than the Indian Laurel, but it is what it is. And no one cares what it looks like when you're playing live. You know, what are your ideas? How's your tone? So, but, you know, I miss the days where inexpensive instruments could have rosewood. The bridge has a problem. And this is not a problem because it has the vintage bridge. A lot of people are putting hip shots on here, or the Fender High Mass, or the Omega bridge, or whatever badasses are still on the market for more sustain and more whatever. I like the sound of the vintage Fender bridge. I've done the badass thing in the past. It makes it sound different. It's not automatically better. So whether it's better or not is very subjective. It's different. Sometimes it'll make a bass, in my experience, a little bit clangy. If you have the zinc saddles for, say, a badass. If you go with a titanium or steel saddle, it'll get brighter. If you go with a brass saddle, it'll get darker. I don't think that the mass of the bridge necessarily affects the sustain so much as which harmonics, are emphasized in that sustain. Lots and lots of great records were done with stock Fender bent metal vintage bass bridges. Lots of sustain in this. But this particular bridge is not bent well. And as you'll see in the video insert I'm putting here, you can see some air on the neck side of this, right where the saddles are. It doesn't make contact with the bass until you get back to where the screws are. So I have a Fender American vintage bridge coming in the mail, which will correct that and give me full contact with the body. And that replacement bridge costs about the same as a pack of bass strings. So, you know, I'm sure a lot of the Squiers are going to be just fine. Something to look out for just in case they had a bad run or someone set the bending machine slightly off. That's the only real playing problem with this bass. Now here's the insert where you can see the fingerboard before I oiled it and conditioned it. You can see that one little spot where, you know, the grain either had a problem or they just did something wrong when finishing it. You can see how dried out it is. And then you can see as I add some fretboard oil to it compared to how it came. And then you can see after the whole thing's oiled. So there are things I could do to get it darker or give it more of a sheen. I may look at it down the road, but for now, just to get that gray out and have it feel good is fine. It doesn't really matter. I think people, if I want to impress people with this bass, I need to get in a lot of hours practicing. Rather than someone say, oh my God, look how pretty that $300 bass's fretboard is. Anyway, I think that covers most of the stuff. Let me know if you have any questions. Now let's let you hear it. Now, on that note, I haven't had a bass for about 4 years. I got this bass 4 days ago, and I have been going through my practices and trying to get my technique back and get my strength and tension back, and playing really much harder than I do on acoustic guitar. And get my rest strokes. And as a result, these two fingers are just bruises right here where they aren't blisters. So I'm not going to be able to really play for another week of getting my calluses back and getting the strength built up where they're supposed to be. So in the playing test, I did one thing, which is very basic, with fingers, and I flinch when I hear it back because I make so many mistakes and I'm just not in the pocket and I'm not there. But it gives a sense of what the bass sounds like with the tone all the way off, in the middle, and all the way up for just a basic finger style thing. And then I do two things, with a pick, which is another valid sound to do with the P bass. I don't care if you think that picks are for guitarists and real bassists only use their fingers. Real bassists use whatever is necessary to make the sound correct. And you'll hear the samples I chose were from two guys who don't need anyone else's opinion about how they play. And on these two tracks, they happen to use a pick. But it also took my weird fingers and the bruises out of the equation. You get to hear what the bass sounds like, again, with the tone down and the tone up. On all these clips, you're just hearing it direct, straight into a Line 6 UX2 with none of the stupid processing on, none of the damn modeling, because the modelers and that thing sound terrible. It's just what a P-bass direct sounds like through a not very good direct box, and hopefully it'll sound good enough to give you an idea of whether or not this sounds like a P-bass. If you like the tone but hate the playing, hey, guess what? Think how much better it would sound if you were playing it. And if you follow this channel, please like and subscribe so you can be. In the coming weeks and months, you'll hear me play stuff that doesn't suck quite so much. But I'm going to go sit on the porch and run some scales until my fingers fall off.